Okay, this is the recorded version of what I went through on Monday's Solar Car Build Zoom. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to locate this square, this rectangle that I made an X through it, and make sure that you're cutting this on a cutting mat of some sort, because you're going to cut through it. You have to cut it completely out. So you put it on there. I have, like I said, I have a household knife, a paring knife. I do have a box cutter, and I do have an X-Acto knife at my house. Just be careful when you cut this, with the grain of the wood, because it cuts pretty easily, like you're cutting through softened butter. Okay, so that's all I'm doing is I'm cutting this out, and then I just follow the lines and I pop that out. Be careful, make sure that it is really, you've gone through it 4 or 5 times, because when you don't necessarily want to pop it out, because then you'll break all of this away. So be very meticulous with it. Obviously, it's a lot harder to cut the top edges, the short sides of the rectangle. It takes even more passes through the balsa wood. And then it takes a lot less effort to go with the grain. So then you can kind of see where I've marred, where I've cut through that. All right, you can start seeing it on the back. So if you see that, go ahead, flip it over and cut through that. And then you're going to take that out of there. All right. The next thing that you're going to do is I have the line and then I have the dots. The black line means that the axle will be put on straight, so you want to follow that line. The blue lines are for where you're going to place your glue. So all you do is you take your glue gun. Actually, first, I'm a little bit more picky maybe than others, but you want to make sure that you have placed the axle so that the wheels are the same distance on either side of the balsa of the chassis. So what you do, grab this first, keep losing my glue stick today, is you put a dot piece of glue here and a dot of glue here. So I'm just kind of make-believing here, so to speak. I have this in position. I want you to envision that I have 2 pieces of glue, and then I'm just going to roll it up to that line. If you can't see the line, you just got to make sure that your axle is following that line, because that means that your car will go straight. Hold it there until it dries. Fast forward. I have the back axle, same exact concept, but I hope you've noticed that I have a longer piece of glass. The axle is longer. There's a bigger distance between the tires on one side than the other. And that is pretty much pairs with this right here. There's a lot less chassis here than there is on this side. So obviously that shorter side is going to line up on this shorter side. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to make sure that that axle fits, the gear fits in that hole that you punched out. So we're just going to put the 3 dots of glue and then roll it into position. And then hold it there. Again, you want to make sure that those wheels, it's not a deal breaker. You want to make sure that those wheels are an equal distance from each side of the chassis. And you can see that my gear is fitting wonderful in that hole that I punched out. Hold it there. You can reinforce it. I'll show you what I mean by reinforcing. You can pull your glue from here to here, and that's what I've done. And you want to especially make sure that you do that so that when you practice with it with your batteries, that your axles aren't going to fall off. So sometime before you practice, make sure that you reinforce with more glue on your axles. So that's a finished product. Okay. And then the next thing that I taught you how to glue were these guide wires right here. So those are in the baggie that are in your kit. There's 2 of them. What you do, we just eyeball this. It's a 1/2 inch from the front and the back of the car. So put your thumb right dead center in the middle, middle, not midder. And your length of your thumbnail is about a 1/2 inch. And that's where you're going to make a mark. So find the middle and then just set your thumb down so that it's from the bottom to the top of your thumbnail, and then make a mark. And so I just made a mark. And so I actually have that done for you back here without it being glued. So again, I put my thumb down and I made a mark. All right. Then what you're going to do is you're very carefully from the bottom, you're going to wiggle back and forth, and you can actually make a puncture mark like pre-drilling with your pencil if that's easier for you, or a pen, whatever you're using. And you're going to thread that through, and then you bring it to the top, and you want to make sure that it's flush. I have a lot of wires in the way, but you want to make sure it's flush. You don't want it so that it's glued like this. You want it flush. And another thing that you have to make sure is that it doesn't drag once I set it on the surface. I'm just going to use my cutting board so you can see that. And I'm definitely clearing with my particular guide wire. They're all a little bit different. You may have to rebend it, and I can show you a quick go through that. I just have needle nose pliers. Pliers work too, but you can this is just a paper clip, and you can bend this so that it's not dragging your surface, your tabletop, or whatever you are working on. So we do that, and then as you can see, I've made a oval. You have to hold that in place and just draw an oval around the top of the guide wire. There's a finished product, and then fill it in with glue so that it's secure. The guide wires are to place it on the track. Fishing line runs through the front to the back of your car that keeps it running in as straight of a line as possible so that you have a good race. All right, then the last thing that has to be glued on, obviously we're going to do the guide wire. You can do that too. I would advise you that you do that. It's not going to be a huge problem if you don't get to it until you're done literally building, because this is left open as I've shown you. The back of the car is always left open, so you can see that you can get that guide wire in there easily. So, but if you've done the front guide wire, you can do the back one at the same time. I just didn't do it because it's boring to watch me sit here and glue. All right. The last main piece, or most important piece probably besides having wheels and it moving, is the engine. So please make sure that your back axle, the glue is set and it is dry, because we need to move it a little bit so that we ensure that the pinion, this is the pinion, this is actually on the engine. Here's the engine by itself. And the gear that you set inside of this rectangle match up. All right. So one important thing that you need to understand is that an engine, the motors have a vent. We don't want to get any glue. If you get any glue, it's a good possibility that you've ruined your engine, and your car won't have air to cool the engine, and it'll run properly. So basically what happens is if you put glue in these vents, then it's not getting air, it's not cooling properly, and it's going to fry this motor. It's a small motor, so it wouldn't take much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the clutter, so to speak, and just use in my video. Again, this is setting on top of the chassis like this. You're going to set that down on top of the chassis. It's going to get glued to the chassis, and you just want to make sure that it is set in there, not like this, not like that, right? Because it's not going to move because it's resting against the motor, but just so most of that pinion is riding right along the top of that gear. So that gives you a better close-up picture. Now I will model how I do that here. Again, I'm keeping in consideration that those holes are not in any way of any glue. This is my finished product. I set that. I'm going to turn my wheels and you can see it moving. Once you feel like you have it and it's moving freely, it's not getting caught, and it's not at an angle where it's down too far, then you glue it. And you can see there. I put a piece of glue. I typically worked from the back and then I put another spot of glue on the front. And then the last thing that we glued, and this is just for purposes of keeping the wires out of the way when you're building, is make sure you leave enough clearance here on the side, because more than likely you're going to have something like this, right? You don't want the glue in the way, so don't glue. And the same thing when you're gluing, and it doesn't matter too much on your axles, but make sure that you leave some clearance for whatever materials you're going to use. So I just held those in place, and as you can see, I applied glue accordingly. It doesn't take a lot. The biggest thing with the wires is make sure that you hold them for a spell. You have to be patient. You have to wait for, most of us understand that hot glue is clear, and then obviously when it cools, it becomes more translucent. We can't quite see through it as clearly as when it's hot. And there's another great example. It's a lot more cloudy or translucent than when I first applied it. So that takes a little bit more patience, especially the motor too. I don't want to let go of the motor until I know that it's secured. So important things to re-clarify: make sure that this back axle is glued on, the glue is set, it is dried before you try and place the motor in place. Because you can tell I'm actually like putting some force on the wheels and making it move. That is all the chassis work. We are now our second Zoom today. We're past that. Everybody's building. I will be back on Zoom tomorrow, which will be Thursday, May 21st.